Well, a Supreme Court case could decide if cities can punish homeless people for sleeping outside. Right now, San Francisco is banned from sweeping encampments because of a lawsuit filed back in 2022. That case is on hold because of a similar case out of Grants Pass, Oregon. That city banned camping in public parks, but a group of homeless people sued and an appeals court struck down the measure, saying it amounts to cruel and unusual punishment. A majority of the Supreme Court appeared to side with the local ordinances allowing cities to ban the homeless people from sleeping or camping in public spaces. But the justices seem split on ideological lines.
A number of us, I think, are having difficulty with the distinction between status and conduct.
Violating this ordinance means you're homeless. So again, homelessness is not something you can that you do. It's just something that you are.
How does this law help deal with the complicated policy issues?
One of the most difficult challenges is getting people the help that they need, and laws like this allow cities to intervene.
Well, the Supreme Court is expected to make a decision by the end of June. In San Francisco, homeless advocates say people who are homeless are being treated unfairly and being unfairly targeted. They marched from the federal building to the steps of City Hall yesterday. We caught up with one man who we first spoke to a few weeks ago about his experiences with homelessness. Lamont Ford was living in Oakland's Wood Street encampment before it was shut down. He's now back on the street saying the current housing options are not safe.
They breed bullying, they breed drug trafficking, they breed sexual abuse, and I'd rather not be a part of that. If you're going to offer me something, at least let it be safe.
Lamont says since the Wood Street encampment has been closed, his life has gotten harder and all he wants is a safe place to live and sleep. And while the city waits for clarity from the U.S. Supreme Court, it's trying to figure out how to address a very visible crisis on the streets. Officials say they only cite or arrest homeless people when they refuse offers of shelter and only clear encampments if they are a public health issue. Kenny Choi was there for one of those homeless sweeps.
Residents in many of the unhoused in the Tenderloin near Leavenworth Avenue say sidewalk sweeps happen several times a week. Amigos market owner Najib Quraish has noticed a difference over the last couple months.
Not so many people hanging around. The street being cleaned.
The small business owner opened his store on Leavenworth and Ellis 20 years ago. He says the proliferation of tent encampments on nearby sidewalks has been problematic.
If it's blocking the way of people through walking through the sidewalk trying to get to here, and people hanging in like it's the tents are blocking them, that's something, it can be considered.
He supports the city's effort to keep the sidewalks clear.
Some people would be afraid coming to businesses like this when they see a lot of people gathering or on the street.
Cities like San Francisco have been limited to how they can enforce encampment cleanups because of previous lower court rulings.
So the question in this case is, do the homeless have some constitutional protection from being criminalized for what they have to do?
Rory Little is a constitutional law professor at UC Law San Francisco.
The likely result is that they will reverse the Ninth Circuit.
A Supreme Court reversal would give cities more leverage in how they address homelessness, including encampments on sidewalks and parks.
They're not going to get into the business of detailed regulation of the homelessness issue. And that in itself will be, in a sense, a victory for the city of Grants Pass.
Little believes federal courts will have less of a role to play in the detailed day-to-day treatment of the homelessness issue. For Najib Quraish, he's open to more city enforcement to keep sidewalks clear of tents.
They're supposed to follow. That's fair. They're supposed to follow. If they have to move them around, move them from one place, they're supposed to follow and move out.
He believes that's good for small businesses and the city as a whole.
Well, the case in San Francisco is on hold until 30 days after the Supreme Court ruling. There's another problem in the way cities and developers address the California's homeless crisis. Much of the effort to build more housing has focused on removing the obstacles set by local governments. And now the state Supreme Court has ruled that cities and counties must be more judicious in the way they access or assess impact fees on development projects. Our John Ramos explains how that could impact what's being built.
The ruling stemmed from a case called Sheets versus El Dorado County, in which a man wanted to put a modular home on his property and was told he had to pay to replace the entire street. Well, the Supreme Court says that wasn't proper, and now it may be a game changer in the housing crisis. Efren Carrillo understands how that man in El Dorado County felt. Here in Santa Rosa, Carrillo was involved with the development of this affordable senior apartment complex on the site of a former mobile home park destroyed by the 2017 Tubbs fire. But the amount the city charged to do that is simply astounding.
Had an average of $40,000 to $60,000 per unit on impact fees. That is money that can be going into building additional housing and residential units for working class people.
Impact fees are the assessments developers must pay for the added burden to the community, streets, utilities, parks, etc. Officials are supposed to study what those impacts are, but they often just assign an arbitrary fee per unit on the projects. And the money collected doesn't even have to be spent in that area.
So it helps pay for parks in other communities, streets improvement in other communities, which is fine. It's just a function of right-sizing what that impact is on the development that you're proposing.
But that's what the Supreme Court said may be unconstitutional. The unanimous ruling said the fees charged must be connected to and roughly proportionate to the actual impact of the development. Jen Close with the Santa Rosa advocacy group Generation Housing says builders now have the power to challenge the validity of local impact fees in court.
And I think that that's what Sheets is going to ultimately require, is that those examinations are a whole lot more specific and more careful. Otherwise, they're going to find themselves defending lawsuits.
Developers have been insisting for years that impact fees are having a stifling effect on new home construction, and that is borne out at the senior complex. 2 phases of the project are complete, but financing for the 3rd phase simply isn't there, and the land next to it sits vacant.
With high development impact fees or impact fees that don't make sense, developers leave the state. They're building in Nevada, they're building in Texas. We think that by right-sizing impact fees, by modifying them, builders can come back to California and build the units that we need.
It will be a hit to local government budgets, but it may be the trade-off required to build the housing they're asking for. Carrillo just wishes they would stop acting like building houses is somehow harming the community.
You would think that building housing and affordable housing would not be seen as an actual impact on the community. There's a little irony in that we're trying to build workforce housing and affordable housing, and yet we're considered an impact.
The ruling didn't define what fees constitute a taking of private property. They're leaving that for the lower courts to hash out. But Jen Close says cities may save themselves a lot of legal costs if they simply cut their fees voluntarily.
And a state law passed in 2022 requires local governments to make the fees more proportional. But it gave them 8 years to study the true impacts. The Supreme Court ruling may hurry that process by exposing them to lawsuits from developers.
Justice! Justice! I can see it becoming more violent. To be next. I can't exist because I'm ugly. Thank you. James, you are phenomenal. I'm staying inside of a camper now. Fired up. I would like to call the next Wood Street residents, please.